She thought he was just a broke U.S. traveler. But when he showed up in a limousine to confess his love, her world turned upside down. "Excuse me," came the unfamiliar voice, low but clear, tinged with an American accent. Anna looked up from her ledger, her pen pausing mid-word. The sun was beginning to set behind the cliffs, casting long shadows across the small wooden porch of her seaside inn. The man standing at her front gate was out of place. Dusty jeans, torn backpack slung over one shoulder, and a denim jacket faded from wear. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, stepping cautiously closer. "I lost my wallet. I've been traveling across Europe and got separated from my group." Anna narrowed her eyes, instantly alert. "And you ended up here?" "In a fishing village with no train station, no direct bus routes, and no tourists this time of year." The man raised both hands, half smiling. "It's a long story." "I'm sure it is," she said, crossing her arms over her chest. "What do you want?" "A place to sleep." "Just for the night," he said. "I'll work for it. Clean the floors, fix something. I just need a roof until morning." Anna glanced around. The town was small, quiet, and the last thing she needed was trouble. The last time she trusted a stranger who just needed a night, she'd ended up chasing a drunk out of her pantry with a broom. "No vacancies," she said curtly. "Your sign says rooms available," he arched a brow. "Not for wanderers with no ID and a sob story." He blinked, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Sorry to bother you." Turning on his heel, he walked away without protest, heading toward the cliffside path. Anna watched him for a moment, heart-hardened by experience, then turned back inside. It wasn't until 2 hours later, when the wind began to howl and rain fell in sheets across the coast, that she saw him again. Through the window, his silhouette sat hunched on the wooden bench beneath her awning, his jacket pulled tight around him, head bowed against the storm. "Damn it!" With a curse under her breath, Anna grabbed a towel and opened the door. "Hey!" The man looked up, his face pale and lips tinged with blue. She sighed heavily. "Come inside before you drown." He dried off by the fireplace while she made tea in the kitchen, muttering to herself the entire time. She brought him a steaming mug, placing it on the table without looking at him. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't thank me," she replied. "You're sleeping in the storage room. Don't touch anything. Don't steal anything. And don't think I won't call the police if you try anything stupid." He smiled despite himself. "Understood." She gave him a glance. "What's your name?" "James." "That all you're going to give me for now?" He shrugged. "I'll earn the rest." By morning, the rain had passed, and so had most of Anna's irritation. James had woken early, cleaned the common room without being asked, and even chopped wood for the fire. She found him stacking logs by the shed when she came outside, a towel draped over his shoulder, his hair still damp. "You're not afraid of work," she admitted. "Nope," he said. "Not afraid of much actually, except maybe cats. They're shifty." She smirked. He stayed another night, then another. Each day he fixed something that had long been left broken: leaky faucets, creaky steps, the cracked window in room 4. He cooked simple meals for the two of them. And though he never said much about himself, he listened when she talked. It was strange having someone around. For 2 years since her mother's death, Anna had run the inn alone, turning down offers from corporations to buy it, refusing to turn her home into another overpriced resort. She didn't trust easily. Not after what happened with Mark. But James was different. She still didn't trust him. Not completely. But she noticed the way he never asked for anything, not even when his boots were soaked or when his hands blistered from hammering boards. He never crossed boundaries, never pried into her life. He just existed, quietly, like he had all the time in the world to wait for her to make up her mind about him. One evening, as they sat on the back porch watching the waves crash beneath the cliffs, James broke the silence. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not leaving me out there in the rain." Anna glanced at him. "I almost did." He smiled. "Yeah, but you didn't." She didn't reply, but something warm flickered in her chest. Maybe it was the firelight. Maybe it was the way he looked at the sea, like it held secrets only he could hear. Maybe it was the way she had started to wait for him in the mornings without even realizing it. Whatever it was dangerous, and she wasn't ready for dangerous. Not yet. The days settled into a rhythm, uneven, unpredictable, but strangely comforting. Anna ran her in like a captain at sea, efficient, disciplined, no nonsense. Every towel folded to a precise square, every booking logged color-coded. Breakfast served at 7:30 sharp. No exceptions. James, on the other hand, seemed to float through the hours like a leaf on the wind. He wandered barefoot through the garden, hummed old rock ballads while sweeping the porch, and had an uncanny knack for striking up conversations with a few guests brave enough to visit in the off-season. "Do you always whistle while you work?" Anna asked one morning, arms crossed as she watched him wash the front windows. "Wrong side of the squeegee, of course." James turned with a grin. "Only when I'm happy." She arched an eyebrow. "You've been here 2 weeks, doing grunt work, living in a storage room. What exactly are you so happy about?" He shrugged. "Sun's out. Roof over my head. Free coffee. That's more than most people have." She couldn't argue with that logic, but it frustrated her all the same, his constant optimism, his ability to shrug off life's weight like it was nothing. He didn't belong in her neat, orderly world, and yet he didn't seem to be leaving. "Why are you still here?" she asked one evening as they locked up the inn together. James tilted his head. "Do you want me to leave?" Anna hesitated. "That's not what I asked." He smiled. "Well, I'm still here because I like it. It's quiet, peaceful. The ocean's beautiful. You make good soup." She rolled her eyes. "That's hardly a reason. I've stayed for less." She didn't know what that meant, and he didn't elaborate. James never talked about his past. Not once. He joked, he listened, he worked hard. But when the conversation turned personal, he sidestepped it like a seasoned dancer. Anna, on the other hand, kept everything close to the vest. She wasn't cold, not exactly, but there was a steel wall around her that James couldn't quite see through. She'd been hurt, anyone could tell. The way she flinched at compliments. The way she stiffened when he stood too close. One afternoon, while painting the fence together, James asked casually, "So who broke your heart?" Anna didn't answer. She just handed him the paintbrush and walked away. Later that night, he found a note taped to his door. "Don't ask questions you're not ready to hear the answers to." He smiled and didn't bring it up again. Despite their differences, or maybe because of them, moments kept sneaking in. Quiet, unexpected moments that caught Anna off guard. Like the time she found him in the kitchen trying to bake banana bread and somehow mistaking salt for sugar. She burst out laughing for the first time in months. Or the night the power went out during a storm and he lit candles all around the dining room and told ghost stories in an exaggerated southern accent, making her laugh until she cried. And then there was the morning she overslept, something she never did, and woke to find breakfast already made, dishes washed, and fresh coffee waiting. "You're slipping," James teased as she stumbled into the kitchen. "Thought you were some kind of hospitality ninja." "Don't get used to it," she muttered, but her cheeks were pink. She didn't understand it, this connection, this undercurrent of warmth that lingered between their snark and silence. It was chaos in her perfectly managed world. But somehow, the place didn't feel empty when he was in it. Still, she kept him at arm's length. Refused to ask about the phone she once saw him lock in a drawer. Refused to wonder how someone who claimed to be broke spoke fluent French to a tourist, or fixed a broken espresso machine like a pro. She didn't ask why he avoided town, why he never went farther than the cliffs, or why he sometimes stared out at the sea like it was calling him home. And he never offered. Whatever ghosts haunted them, they danced quietly between the walls of that inn. For now, that was enough. But deep down, both of them knew, the peace wouldn't last forever. The wind howled like a wild animal that night, rattling the shutters and slamming waves against the cliffs with a fury that shook the very bones of the inn. Anna stood by the back door, raincoat pulled tight around her, peering out into the storm. The old supply shed down by the edge of the property had been making strange noises all evening. She'd put off checking it earlier, but something gnawed at her now. Instinct or habit, she wasn't sure. She grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the rain. The wind nearly ripped the door from her hand. She pushed forward, boots squelching in the soaked earth, water soaking through her jeans in seconds. James had offered to check it earlier, but she'd waved him off. "I can handle it," she'd said. She always said that. The rain lashed her face as she made her way down the slippery path toward the shed. The beam of her flashlight danced wildly with each gust of wind. She never saw the loose stone. Her foot slipped, skidding out from beneath her, and in an instant she was falling, sliding down the slope toward the cliff's edge, the flashlight flying from her grip. She screamed, but the wind stole the sound. Her hand scrabbled for purchase on wet grass, nails digging into mud, but gravity won. She slammed into a ledge a few feet down, hard, and cried out in pain. Her ankle twisted beneath her, and she couldn't move. Rain poured down her face. The sea roared just below. And then, footsteps. Fast. Heavy. "Anna!" "James!" "Down here!" she shouted hoarsely. She saw his face appear over the edge a second later, soaked and frantic. "Hold on! I'm coming down." "Don't be stupid," she called. "You'll fall too." But he didn't listen. He slid down the same path she had, expertly maneuvering over the rocks, using his jacket as leverage to brace against a tree. When he reached her, he dropped to his knees. "Are you hurt?" "My ankle," she gasped. "I can't move it." He didn't hesitate. With one arm behind her shoulders and the other under her knees, he lifted her carefully, gritting his teeth as the weight pulled on his arm. She noticed the blood right away. "You're bleeding," she whispered. His forearm had a deep scrape, dripping crimson through the rain. "It's fine," he muttered. "Let's just get you out of here." Step by step, he carried her back up the muddy slope, slipping once but never falling, never letting her go. When they reached the inn, he kicked the door open and carried her inside, laying her gently on the couch by the fire. She shivered, soaked to the bone. He grabbed blankets, towels, whatever he could find. She watched him in a daze as he wrapped her like she was made of glass. "You should have let me check the shed," he said softly, dabbing her face dry. She opened her mouth to reply, but instead her throat caught, and then she was crying. Big, silent tears sliding down her cheeks, mixing with the rainwater. He froze. "Anna!" She leaned forward, burying her face in his shoulder, arms wrapping around him tightly. "I thought I was going to die," she whispered. His arms came around her instantly, strong and warm. "I've got you. You're okay. I've got you." They stayed like that for a long time. The storm still raging outside, but somehow muted by the beating of two hearts in one room. Something had changed, not with a kiss, or a confession, or a dramatic moment, but with a fall, a rescue, and a raw, unguarded embrace. Anna didn't pull away. And James didn't let go. The inn had been unusually quiet that morning. The last of the weekend guests had checked out early, and the wind outside had died to a gentle hum. Anna wandered through the hallway, a cup of coffee in her hand, comforted by the stillness, until she heard a voice. A familiar one, but muffled, urgent, and coming from the garden. She paused near the open kitchen window, listening. "I told you, not yet," James said, voice low but firm. "No, I'm not ready to come back. I need more time." There was a pause. Then he added, "Yeah, I know what's at stake. But I meant what I said. I'll handle it." Anna's heart thudded. The voice was unmistakably his, calm but sharpened, speaking in flawless American English. But the words didn't fit the carefree, drifting handyman she had come to know. She leaned closer and peeked through the curtains. James stood at the far end of the garden, his back to her, phone pressed to his ear, not the cracked, outdated one he always left on the kitchen counter. This was a sleek black device she had never seen before. When the call ended, he tucked the phone into the inside pocket of his coat. Anna stepped outside. "Interesting call." James turned slowly, caught off guard. "Anna, I didn't hear you." "No kidding," she said coldly, arms crossed. "Who were you talking to?" He blinked. "It was just—" "Don't lie." Silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Finally, James sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "It's complicated." Her eyes narrowed. "That's not an answer. I can't explain. Not now." "Why?" she snapped. "Because you're not who you say you are. Because you're using a second phone you've been hiding since the day you got here." He looked away. "That's what I thought," she whispered. "Anna, listen." "No," she cut him off. "I let you into my home, my life. I trusted you." "I never asked for that," he said quietly. "I told you I was passing through. And yet here you are, still. Pretending. Making me believe you're just some guy with a broken past and a good heart." His expression shifted, pain flashing through his eyes. "You think I'm conning you," he said. "I don't know what to think," she replied. "Because clearly, I don't know you at all." He took a step forward. "Just give me time, please." Time for what? To disappear in the night. To call whoever that was and tell them the job's done. "Anna, I want you gone," she said, voice shaking. "Today." James stood frozen, like he wanted to say something more. But then he nodded once. "I understand." Without another word, he walked past her, through the inn's doors, and up the stairs to gather his things. Anna didn't watch him go, but when she heard the soft click of the front door closing for the last time, it felt louder than any storm. The days after James left felt longer than any storm Anna had weathered. The inn was quiet again, too quiet. Without his humming, his off-key singing in the kitchen, the odd laughter he used to pull from her without trying, everything felt hollow. But pride held her back. She had made her decision, and she would not be the fool who second-guessed it. Then came the morning everything changed. It started like any other, the smell of brewed coffee, the hum of the heater, and her father, Mr. Lawrence, sitting at his usual spot by the window, sipping tea and watching the waves. Anna was pouring his second cup when she heard it, a sharp, rasping breath. Then his hand slipped from the table. "Dad." He tried to speak, but the words came out garbled. His eyes rolled back. "Dad!" she screamed. The teacup shattered on the floor as she rushed to him. His body was limp, his breathing shallow and uneven. Panic gripped her as she tried to lift him, to get a response. He wasn't moving. She fumbled for her phone with trembling fingers, but in the chaos, it slipped from her grasp and clattered beneath the counter. "Somebody help!" she cried. "Please, someone!" And then he was there. James, bursting through the door like a storm of his own. Soaked from the rain, eyes blazing, he dropped to his knees beside her father and assessed the situation in a heartbeat. "He's having a stroke," James said urgently. "Call emergency, now." Anna stared, frozen. "My phone." It fell. James was already pulling his own from his pocket, dialing emergency services with one hand while starting CPR with the other. "Stay with me, sir," he said calmly as he began chest compressions. "Don't you dare give up now." Anna watched in disbelief, tears streaming down her face. He was supposed to be gone. But he had never really left. She dropped beside him, holding her father's hand, whispering prayers between sobs. "Please, please don't take him from me too." The ambulance arrived minutes later. Paramedics took over, and Anna followed them out, holding her father's hand until the very last second before he was lifted into the vehicle. James stood back, silent, rain dripping from his coat. When the ambulance disappeared down the hill, Anna turned to face him. Her eyes were red, her voice raw. "Why?" He looked at her with that same quiet steadiness she had come to know. "Why did you come back?" she asked. "Why were you even here?" "I never really left," he said softly. "I stayed nearby. I needed to make sure you were okay." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "But I told you to go. I said." "I know what you said," James interrupted gently. "But you didn't mean it. Not all of it. And even if you did, I still couldn't stay away." Her voice cracked. "You saved his life." James took a step forward, eyes searching hers. "Because he's your father. And you're not just someone I lived with. You're not just some innkeeper in a town I stumbled into." "Then what am I?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. He hesitated, then said with quiet conviction, "You're the only place I've ever felt at home." Anna stared at him, her breath catching. Tears rolled down her cheeks again, but this time they weren't from fear. She stepped forward, reached for his hand, and gripped it tightly. "I don't know who you are, James. I don't know why you lied or what you're hiding," she whispered. "But I know you didn't have to come back. And you did. His voice was never left. Not really. Not in here. He touched his chest. And in that moment, Anna believed him. Whatever secrets he held, his heart had never lied. The days that followed her father's emergency were a blur. Mr. Lawrence was stable, recovering slowly in the hospital, and Anna spent most of her time by his side. But even as she tended to her father's needs, her thoughts drifted constantly to James. He had vanished. Just like that. After saving her father's life, after holding her hand, saying things that felt real, he had disappeared without a word again. And this time, it hurt worse. She searched for him in every corner of the village, passed quietly at the cafe, the marina, even the post office. Nothing. No one had seen him. It was as if he had been a dream, one she should never have let herself believe in. 3 days later, the stillness shattered. It began with a sound Anna had never heard in the village before, the purr of a luxury engine, smooth and deep. Curious locals peeked through their windows as a long black limousine pulled up in front of the inn. The villagers gathered like moths to a flame. Whispers rose in the wind. Who is that? Someone famous? Must be some rich American. Anna was behind the reception counter when the doors of the limousine opened. The first to emerge was a man in a sleek gray suit and earpiece, clearly a bodyguard. Then came another in tailored navy, holding a leather folder. And then, James. But not the James she knew. He stepped out of the car like he belonged in another world. His dark suit hugged his frame perfectly. His shoes gleamed. His hair was swept back. Every inch of him polished and poised. Gone were the worn jeans, the boyish smiles, the humble hands that fixed broken fences. This man was powerful. Commanding. A stranger. Anna stood frozen behind the counter, her breath caught somewhere between awe and betrayal. James walked toward the door with calm certainty, the bodyguard and assistant flanking him like shadows. When he entered, the bell above the door jingled softly, an oddly ordinary sound in the midst of something so surreal. He paused at the threshold, his eyes searching for her. When they met hers, something flickered in his expression. "Anna," he said softly. She didn't respond, couldn't. Her legs locked beneath her. The townsfolk outside whispered furiously. "Why are you here?" she finally asked, her voice cool, controlled. "I came to explain," he said. "Explain what?" she snapped. "That you've been lying to me from the moment we met?" "I never lied," he said gently. "I just didn't tell the whole truth." Her laugh was dry. "That's the same thing." He stepped closer. "My name is James Donovan. My family owns Donovan Media Group, based in New York." Anna blinked, stunned. "I needed to get away," he continued. "From the expectations, the politics, the image. I wanted to see the world without being followed by cameras or catered to by assistants. I wanted something real. So you decided to play the poor traveler and land in my inn?" Her voice trembled with restrained emotion. "No," he said. "That part wasn't planned. I got lost, literally. I was supposed to meet a friend in Marseilles and ended up taking the wrong train. When I found this village, it felt peaceful. I was going to stay one night," he said. "And instead, you stayed in my home," she said. "You shared my table. My life." He nodded. "Because the longer I stayed, the more I didn't want to leave." Anna looked down, her hands clenched into fists. "You let me think you were someone else. I opened up to you. I trusted you." "I know," he said quickly. "And I'll never forgive myself for breaking that trust." She looked at him again, this man in the perfect suit with the perfect name, standing in the same spot where a barefoot, rain-soaked James once knelt beside her father and saved his life. "You should go," she said, her voice barely a whisper. James's jaw tensed. "Please. Just let me say what I came to say." "Why?" she asked. "So you can soothe your guilt and go back to your penthouse?" "No," he said. "So I can tell you that none of that matters. Not the money, not the name, not the suit. The only real thing I found was you." She stared at him, unmoved. He took a breath. "I'm still the man who made you banana bread with salt. The man who got stung trying to fix your rose bushes. The man who listened to your silence and waited for your trust. Silence stretched between them. Then Anna said quietly, "You lied by omission, and it hurts more than any spoken lie." James nodded, his voice almost broken. "I know." He placed a small envelope on the counter. "This is a deed," he said, "transferring partial ownership of the inn to your name alone. No strings. No thanks needed. Just protection. In case you ever need it." She didn't touch it. He turned toward the door, his shoulders heavy. And when he stepped outside, the whispers returned. Anna stood behind the glass, watching him walk away, her world spinning. He hadn't come back as a wanderer. He had come back as a king. But the man she had fallen for had always just been James. And she wasn't sure which version she missed more.